Hey everybody, it's Tim from Linessa Farms, Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again tonight. Hope everyone is doing well. So, if it is your first time joining us, welcome. If you've joined us before, welcome back. It's nice to do this every week and kind of answer some of your questions and concerns that you may have, and just kind of chit chat about some of the things that are going on. We have been really, really busy here. We actually just wrapped up cutting some of our hay. We wrapped up the last of our hay actually today. It has been quite a adventure trying to get the hay out of the ground. Seems like parts of the United States this year are flooding out, and then other parts of the United States aren't getting any rain at all. So hay prices this year are going to be a little wacky, just because we've got areas like West Texas where they're not getting any rain at all. We've got friends in parts of Texas that haven't seen any significant rain since like last October. And then here, I think I've gotten, over 5 inches this month. I think last week alone we had 3.5 inches of rain. So some places can't grow hay, other places are having a hard time getting a cut because we're getting so much rain. So it's going to be interesting going into this fall. The other thing that's going to be interesting is, what is $6 a gallon diesel going to do to some of these prices, and what's it going to do to our livestock uh, prices as well? Unfortunately, so far, we have not seen much of an increase in overall livestock prices. They seem to be either stagnant or dropping a little bit, but everything else is going up. So we've got increased hay prices, we've got increased grain prices, but the sale barn prices haven't necessarily been keeping up. So I know some of our friends in West Texas are telling us that, they're looking at prices for a round bale somewhere in the realm of like $140 for a round bale. Here in Indiana, historically, for over 1,000 pound round bale, we would be looking at between $50 and $60. I personally don't like using round bales. It's a necessary evil that we do when we get a large number of animals, but you just get so much waste with the round bales as opposed to the small squares. Even with the best round bale feeder, it seems like we get some waste with those. And, that creates a lot of issues, especially during the winter months when it is wet out there, and when the animals have, it's a little bit soggier out there. The issue that you really got to watch out for is different types of infections, different types of gastrointestinal infections. We really worry about things like listeria. Listeria is, one of those things that generally the animals tend to get from eating moldy and nasty hay that's on the ground. And there's kind of this misnomer that as long as they have clean hay in the feeder, they're not going to eat dirty hay off the ground, and that's not always necessarily the case. Same thing with some people will tell you, well, oh, they'll only drink clean fresh water. Nah, that's not the case either. We've had clean fresh water out, and then I can look over and see my animals drinking out of a mud hole. So we try to control moisture as much as we can. Just to make sure that we do our best. We try to use wire panels and things like that to make sure that we minimize waste and keep them from just free eating. We're not fans of just rolling around bale in there and letting them go at it. But you have to find what works for you. The problem with small squares is the handling process, getting them to you and having a place to put them. Round bales are a little bit more user friendly. So yeah, Brian says he uses feedlot panels to make a square and put around his hay, and that does definitely keep the waste down. Anything that you can do to control your waste, as far as putting up panels around them, putting up some kind of wire that they have to eat through. They do have netting that you can buy online. It tends to be a little pricey. They have super duper heavy netting you can buy for round bales now, I've seen. I worry about that with goats, because I worry about that with the goat's horns. But that's just something that we've bought one. I am going to use it, and I'll kind of keep you guys posted on how it works for us. But yeah, mostly what we use here is well, we use about a 50-50 mix of round bales and squares. We've been getting some calls this week. Trying to think of what really pressing we've been getting this week. It's the time of year, of course, when people are buying livestock. We have videos about purchasing livestock. If any of you guys have had issues with purchasing livestock in the past, or any specific problems that have come up when you've purchased livestock, or if you've been burned before, kind of let us know and tell us a little bit about, what your experience was. Um, some things are really, really easy to catch when you go to buy sheep and goats. Other things, not so much. As we've said in our videos before, we're always huge fans of you guys going to the farm that you're getting them from, if at all possible, seeing where they're coming from, seeing what they're eating, seeing what the parents look like, things of that nature, giving them the once over. And that's in a perfect world. The problem that you run into at the sale barn is, you don't get to lay hands on them. You don't get to look at them necessarily before you buy them, other than on the show ring floor. And, if you're buying an animal for feed, or to eat, that's not as big of a deal. But if you're buying it for breeding stock, you're kind of really rolling the dice. When we go to purchase breeding stock, either on a farm or anywhere that you're buying breeding stock, it's really, really important, especially for those females, that you check their teat structure and make sure that everything is the way that it should be. You can end up, especially with goats, are really bad about getting what's called the in the business, they'll call it fish tit. I know it's not the most politically correct term in the world, but basically the teat it'll have two kind of separated teats down at the bottom. Sometimes one of them works, sometimes one of them doesn't. And the problem that you're going to get with that is, well, first of all, it's a disqualifier for most shows. So if you're going to sell it to anyone that's in 4-H or anything like that, chances are they're going to be disqualified. A lot of times, they're not registerable, or they're registerable with the defect. The problem is that not both of those will always produce milk, and so what you get a baby that's trying to suckle on a non-functional teat, and then you can have starvation and all kinds of other problems. Plus, genetically speaking, it tends to carry through to the offspring, and that can be a huge problem as well. The other thing we most definitely want to watch for is the bite. Make sure that the bite is correct. Make sure that the animal's not parrot mouth, where they have a horrible overbite or a horrible underbite. Parrot mouth, we see this happen a lot. We get people that call us and they're like, I bought a baby, I've been feeding it, and it's just not putting on any weight. What's going on? And then you look at the animal's bite, and the bite is so messed up that they almost can't even eat correctly without having some serious problems. So definitely two things you want to look for. And of course, we lose that advantage when we don't get to look at the animals in a setting like the sale barn. You're not going to get to inspect the bite and inspect the teat structure most times until after you've already bid on them and got them. So we have some questions here. So question, why wouldn't my herd grow as expected if I give them hay, grain twice a day, deworm them, and also have good pasture? My January baby only weighs 33 pounds and is a boar goat. I also give them alfalfa and Timothy pellets twice a day. So this is a great question. So we get asked this a lot by individuals. They say, okay, I've got animals, I'm doing everything right, and I'm seeing like slow growth. So sometimes you'll hear people attribute this to like a dwarf gene or something like that. No, not normally. So normal culprit, if you have an animal and it's not growing appropriately, a lot of times the culprit is some type of gastrointestinal issues going on. And usually this has something to do with coccidia. The worst thing about coccidia, so everybody hears about coccidia and everybody says like, oh, if your animals get coccidia, you're going to know they're going to have scours, they're going to have bloody diarrhea, they're going to die, so on and so forth. No, not true. A lot of the coccidia that is actually out there, and a lot of the coccidia that causes the most economic damage to sheep and goat farmers, is what we call subclinical coccidia. And so subclinical coccidia infestations, or coccidiosis, basically that inflammation and infection in that lining of the intestines. So what's going on here? Well, when we talk about subclinical illnesses, we're talking about, the term is subclinical. So what that means is that they've got an infection, or they've got a load on them that's causing them a deficit, but you can't see it. You don't have the typical clinical manifestations like diarrhea, scours, bloody diarrhea, significant weight loss, things like that. And instead, you just get this failure to thrive with the animal. And this can be one of two things. This can either be an active coccidia infestation, or this can be a coccidia infestation that occurred and has resolved. It can even be a worm load that's been there and resolved. Generally speaking, what happens when you think about the intestinal lining of these animals, the intestinal lining is what absorbs most of the nutrients. So these animals eat food, they eat vitamins, they eat nutrients. Their stomachs partially digest it. As it gets into the lining of the intestines and the lining of the stomachs that are further along in the digestive process, they actually have these areas inside those stomachs that almost look like hair. And if you've ever seen the inside of an intestine, by slaughtering an animal, or for whatever reason, maybe in biology class, you'll notice that they have all of these fine looking hairs on them. And that's what we call cilia. And it depends on the area of the animal that we're talking about. But, and they do have other terms, but those little hairs just increase the surface area of the intestines, and it helps to absorb nutrients. And so it's the same thing in us as people. Our small intestines absorb a majority of the nutrients that we eat. Our large intestines, and the same thing in animals, the large intestines basically just absorb a lot of the hydration, a lot of the fluid. But nutrients, vitamins, things like that are mainly absorbed in the small intestine. The other thing to understand is that vitamin B absorption primarily takes place in this area as well. And a lot of the vitamin B that these animals are absorbing is actually being produced by the gut microbes that are there. They are, it's kind of this, we call it symbiotic, kind of a happy relationship that we have with these microbes. We feed them and they help us out by producing things that we need, like vitamin B. And then it gets absorbed into the intestine and into the body. So what can happen is when you have these babies when they're very little, if a baby gets a bad coccidia infestation when they're little, or if this baby gets a bad parasite load when it's little, it actually damages the lining of their intestines to the point that there becomes permanent damage to the lining of that intestine. It becomes inflamed, or it becomes scarred, and the animal is never right. They never recover from it, and you're always going to have this failure to thrive. So it seems like you're pouring feed into them, and they are eating it, and you are giving them all the things that they need. But the problem is because there's scarring on that intestinal lining, or inflammation on that intestinal lining, they're no longer able to absorb those nutrients. So if you can imagine, they're taking all this in, and then it's all just going out without getting absorbed. So what to do? Well, the best things that you can do is to provide these animals with an anti-coccidiosis medication very, very early in life. We like to treat our females for coccidia, with medication for coccidia when they are very, very, very late in pregnancy, maybe like 1 month prior to having their babies. And then after that, we start feeding, when we're feeding our babies, their creep feed or their daily rations. We want to make sure that we're giving them medication in order to prevent coccidia as well. Most of these medications aren't necessarily anti-coccidia medications. They just interrupt the reproductive system of the coccidia. So these are things like Decox, Bovatec, Dequinate. There's a bunch of different medications. If you've heard of Corid and things like that before, those are actual medications that you give animals if they have a active coccidia infestation or coccidiosis, and they're pretty hard on them. Decox is a pretty nasty drug. It does work most of the time, but it is a pretty nasty drug. So most of the time when we hear from people that are having these issues, these failure to thrive issues with the baby goats and the baby lambs, we're looking at a subclinical coccidia infestation. And it's just there. It's either already done the damage or it's actively doing the damage. So the number one way, again, to prevent this is treat the animals with coccidia preventative drugs early in life up through weaning. And that should help you out quite a bit. And you can pick this stuff up all over the place. On Foundation Feed, we sell a complete mineral with coccidia medication in it, coccidia preventative medication in it. I know there's other big box stores and stuff that you can buy this at as well. Coccidia is one of those things that is just everywhere. And we don't like medicating our animals any more than the next person. I completely understand not wanting to medicate. Unfortunately, coccidia is everywhere. And it is probably the number one issue as far as monetary impact on small farms. That's the one that causes a lot of the problems. So we use a lot of decox in our feed as a preventative. And so we really don't get coccidia. We really don't tend to get coccidiosis on our farm. If you do get coccidiosis, I think Corid is one of the easier ones to get on hand. But it's hard on them. If you're going to give Corid, then you need to make sure that you're supplementing them with some kind of injectable vitamin B. Because it's going to, the way Corid works is it basically messes up the vitamin B production or the way the coccidia take up vitamin B, and that's the way that it gets rid of them. So, you need to be cautious when using that. So I've got a question: can Bachox be used as a preventative for the pregnant females in their late pregnancy? I don't know. I don't use it. I can find out for you. I can do some research on that for you and get back with you. But unfortunately, I can't give you that answer right now because I don't know. So yeah, I apologize for that. I know it seems like I always have the answers. But just like everybody else, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. So Brian says he has a question about Foundation Feed. Do you only sell feed in 10 pounds and not in 50-pound bags? So we sell in bulk. We can sell you as much as you need. We list online in 10 pounds. And the reason for that is essentially the issue is we're a very small company. And the reality is everybody's addicted to Amazon, right? So if we don't offer free shipping, people are like, well, I don't want it. It's not, if I can't get free shipping, I don't want it. So when we started the feed company, what I did was I went to a feed producer who he runs a very tight ship. He's a graduate of Purdue University School of Veterinary Science, and he knows his stuff. This guy's no joke, and he specializes in sheep and goats. And I said, hey, I need you to make me a feed that is super high protein and has everything that anybody could need all in one pellet that people can mix with just cracked corn and have a complete feed. And he kind of looked at me like I was nuts and he scratched his head, but eventually we came up with it. So while we do only sell our feed in 10-pound bags online through Foundation Feed, you have to realize also that you're only mixing in 4 ounces of that with your daily ration for your animal to get what you need. With that being said, we understand some of you need a lot of feed because you have a lot of animals. With that being said, you can easily send us an email. We can get you bulk price and bulk shipping. And we can work that out with you. And we do that all the time with individuals all over the United States. If you want the most bang for your buck with Foundation Feed, and let's say you already have like a feed that you really like, but it's not medicated, you can go to the big box store in town or the local mill and pick up maybe a 16% or something that you really like, but it doesn't have the medication or the anti-coccidia medication that you need. We do offer a mineral and It is medicated with anti-coccidia medication as well, and it's a tiny amount that you need per day. It's like one half to 1 ounce per head per day. And you just top dress your feed with it and you're good to go. That's our alpha lamb and our alpha goat product. So anyways, so we've got some things that have come up recently. Hopefully that answer you guys' questions. If you have any more, again, open forum, just ask whatever you want and we'll go from there. So we've got some calls this week about E. coli. So it's a tough question. When your goats and your sheep get scours, or when your lambs and your goat kids get scours, what does it mean? Well, just because they have scours, does it mean they have a bacterial infection? Does it mean that they have something major going on? Maybe not. We expect to see a little bit of scours every year when our lambs and our goat kids first go on creep feed. We tend to notice they get a little bit of an upset stomach maybe for that first day, and we can usually tell when it happens. We put free choice creep feed out for our lambs and we put free choice creep feed out for our lambs and our goat kids at birth. But the reality is they really don't tend to start going after it until about 2 weeks of life. And that depends on if they have any big brothers and big sisters that are there to show them how to eat as well. But they tend not to go after it till about 2 weeks of life. And in that time period, we normally notice that they'll get a little bit of an upset stomach and maybe have a little bit of scours for maybe 12 to 24 hours. And we normally don't do much for them in that regard. And it just resolves on its own. If you have an animal with scours, the consistency of the scours, the color of the scours, and the smell of the scours is very, very important to try to determine what it is that you're looking at. If you have a baby lamb or a baby goat that has extremely watery diarrhea, just very, very watery. So we're not talking about loose. We're talking about water with blood. You're almost definitely dealing with coccidia or coccidiosis. That's the telltale sign. If you're seeing blood in it, especially, chances are they're so far along that recovery may be extremely difficult. And if you do recover them, you may have permanent scarring that we talked about earlier in this feed, and it may have long-term consequences for you. Same thing with parasite loads. If you get a bad enough parasite load, it can slow them down for life. So that's coccidia. If you get green scours, and it's going to have a weird smell to it, a very nauseating kind of smell to it, that is generally going to be E. coli. And you need to be very, very careful when you're handling these animals. We see this a lot. We see this occur a lot in day-old and 2-day-old bottle goats. You'll see them online sometimes in the spring. Some of the dairies are just getting rid of them, or they're getting rid of them for really cheap. They're like, hey, day-old bottle babies or 2-day-old bottle babies. You need to be very, very cautious. Do not ever, ever, ever buy an animal from anyone that has scours and bring it back to your home. Because if you do something dumb, like buy an animal with E. coli and you bring that back to your house, a couple things are going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is that animal's more than likely going to die, and any of the other animals you purchased with it are probably also going to die. The other thing is it's highly, highly contagious. You can spread it to your healthy animals that you have on your farm. And to make matters even worse, it's highly contagious to you and your family. So anyone that's handling those animals that have E. coli, the chances of you getting it are significantly high. Even if you wash your hands and do everything perfect that you're supposed to do, it's still something that you can pick up. I spent some time in the emergency room, plugged into an IV, probably about 4 years ago, trying to help out a friend that had some bottle babies that they picked up that had E. coli, and it turned into a disaster. So just something for you to keep in mind. If you've just got mildly loose brown stool, chances are it's just an upset stomach from a change in feed or a richness in feed. But again, those other ones you really, really need to watch for. If you think you have a bacterial infection, you need to contact your veterinarian as soon as possible. and see what you can do to keep it from getting worse. We are huge fans of Spectam. That's that red stuff. So you'll see it also sold as Scour Halt. You can pick that up recently. It's been off the market with all the difficult supply chain issues that we've been dealing with. I believe Valley Vet has some. So if you need some, check out Valley Vet and see if they've got some. I think there might be a few other places online that have it as well. If we get any kind of questionable scours, we generally tend to dose our littles, so our little lambs or our little goats with about 5 mLs oral drench every 24 hours as needed. And if we have an adult with scours that we feel needs to be addressed, we would do 10 milliliters oral drench for them, again, once every 24 hours. But when in doubt, contact your vet. They can give you meds that are going to help you out a lot. High Rock Chicks, hello. Nice to see you. We have bought some hatching eggs from High Rock Chicks, and they are very, very good. So if you guys need hatching eggs, make sure you check them out online. Can your feed be given to bucks as well? Hi, Cheryl. So yeah, our feed can be given to bucks as well. So if you were going to feed any of the foundation feed to bucks, you would want to feed them the Ultra Goat Kid feed. The Ultra Goat Kid is specially formulated to make sure we have a good balance of that calcium phosphorus that we always want to watch for to prevent urinary calculi, and it also actually contains some ammonium chloride as well. So perfectly acceptable to feed to bucks. And then we have a special mineral for bucks and rams only, and it is a no phosphorus mineral, so it has no phosphorus in it at all. Can pneumonia present itself without a cough? Recently, I've lost 3 goats, and the last one clearly showed signs of pneumonia, but the first did not. Only saw feces at the beginning and then lethargy. So again, and this is very, very important. So if you guys don't have, if y'all don't have a thermometer, I want you to go out and get one. That's probably one of the most important things that you can have in your little toolkit. It'd be great if you guys could put together like a little tack box or a little, some kind of little Rubbermaid, like a tackle box or something like that. And I would keep things in there like, wound spray, scissors, iodine, definitely a rectal thermometer. So when we're doing our initial health assessment on our animals, and we kind of talked about this last week, but when we're doing our initial health assessment on our animals, one of the very first things that I want you to check for is I want you to check for body temperature and make sure that their temperature is appropriate. If you are going to do this right, you need to check their temperature and see if they're running a temp. If they're running a temp, chances are, most of the time they're going to have some kind of a bacterial infection. And just like humans, when we present even with respiratory infections, some of us it's very audible, and you can hear it. When I'm at the hospital and I'm listening to patients, some of my patients have wheezes that I can hear. Others I can't hear until I put a stethoscope on them. Sometimes they may have a wheeze in their right side and sometimes not. Sometimes it'll be in their lower lobes or sometimes it's in their upper lobes. It's very, very difficult to know. So, in the hospital setting, I put a stethoscope on patients and listen to them. You could always buy a stethoscope. I use a stethoscope to listen to my sheep and goat lungs too. You can always do that. The question then is we're getting into, do you know what you're hearing and what's normal and what's not? So that's not necessarily very user friendly. But what I will tell you is if you check their temperature and they are running a temp, then you need to treat them with antibiotics. The most effective antibiotic, a broad spectrum tetracycline based antibiotic that you can buy over the counter, at least right now, is LA200 or the generic version of LA200, which is the Duramycin 72200. And we usually give our adults or anything that's 50% body weight or higher, we're going to give them 5 milliliters subcutaneously. And then we're going to repeat that in 48 hours, another 5 milliliters subcutaneously. And I know that, some of you have heard different routes of administration. We didn't make this up. This isn't my idea to give 5 ml sub-Q. That's coming from Pipestone Veterinary Service. And that's what we've used, and it seems to be what works. If you're blessed enough to have new floor and to be able to use new floor, you can pick that up from your veterinarian. And we would normally do a 6 milliliter subcutaneous followed by another 6 ml sub-Q 48 hours later. So those are kind of the two go-tos for you. Would be LA200 and Draxxin, or excuse me, and Nuflor. Draxxin's out there, and Draxxin works great. But chances of, I don't even talk too much about Draxxin, because the reality is that stuff's, between $200 and $300 for a bottle, and it's just not cost effective for most farms. So the long-winded answer to your question, Gabrielle, is yes. Pneumonia can manifest and present itself in many different ways, and the main thing I want you to consider moving forward is, don't be afraid to check that animal's body temperature. If you don't know what sheep and goat normal body temperatures are, you can look that up online and just see where you fall. And if they're running a temp, then chances are they've got a bacterial infection and you need to treat them with antibiotics. When giving CDT, Joaquin Fierro, hello. When giving CDT vaccines to lambs, do you change the needle after every shot? This is a great question. So no, we don't. But boy, that sure goes against common logic, right? And I completely understand. With people, we would never in a million years think of, we talk about keeping sterile and keeping things clean. Why on earth would you stick an animal and then withdraw and then stick another animal? So here's what I'll tell you. For a cost-effective way of looking at things, there's no way you're going to be able to give an injection and change the needle. It'll cost you so much money to give your vaccines, it'll drive you batty. But here's what I do want to tell you about any kind of injections that you're giving, is that some of these injectables that you get the bottle, so you've got the bottle for your injectables, some of them are what we call bacteriostatic, some of them are what we call bactericidal, and some of them don't have anything going on at all. So in the case of not having anything going on at all, if you get into this bottle with a needle, you need to wipe off the top with alcohol, then withdraw with a fresh, clean needle, and that's it. It's done. There's no more withdrawing, and you're just done. Then we get into what's called bacteriostatic. And what that is that means that the medication has some kind of preservative or medication in it that prevents bacteria from growing. So don't get confused with that, though. You can still put bacteria into this bottle and it won't die. It just won't grow. So that's bacteriostatic. So think about when something's static, it's not changing. It's just kept the same. And then you have what's called bactericidal. And these are medications that have things in them that would kill a bacteria. So depending on the injectable that you're dealing with, if it's got no protection at all, bacteriostatic or bactericidal, depends on how well it's going to work against, carrying some kind of bacteria that's going to make your animal sick. So what we want to do is, let's say we're giving a CDT vaccine to 10 of our lambs or 10 of our goat kids. You always want to use a clean needle to withdraw the medication. So when you're drawing up that medication, if let's say we were going to be giving 5 animals their vaccination, so that means we're going to need a total of 10 milliliters. So we would put a clean needle on and we would withdraw our 10 milliliters. And then we can go ahead and use that needle to administer our vaccination. And then after a couple animals, you're going to reuse it and reuse it and reuse it, as long as it's not getting, you didn't drop it or anything wild like that. And after 3 or 4 animals, you may notice that it's getting dull. And in that case, you can just swap out the needle and continue going. I know this isn't best practice, and I'll be the first one to tell you that. And this is just the way that most of us producers deal with it. We normally have a large gun style injector, and we'll just swap out the needles as needed. But we are always cautious to make sure that, and if we're accessing a bottle, we put a clean needle on there because we don't want to introduce any bacteria or anything into another bottle. So hopefully that answers your question. Now, some of these bottles like Cdnt are going to tell you that they're a one-use only vial. We actually cheat, and what we do is if we have a Cdnt bottle and we know we're going to have to access it more than once or on more than one occasion, we actually inject a small amount of aqueous penicillin into our Cdnt. It's not a live um, vaccine, so it's not like there's anything in there to kill. So we don't have to worry about the penicillin killing the vaccine, and it just works as a preservative. So if I've got a 50 ml bottle of Cdnt, I may inject 2 to 3 mLs of aqueous penicillin in there, and I just stir it up and then keep it in the fridge, and it tends to last fine without getting any funky growth going on in there. So that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. So what's your favorite to raise, sheep or goats? We've always raised goats, but my son wants some sheep. So Luke, what do you guys think? For those of you on here that raise both, if you have a favorite, please let us know. I like things about both of them. So I like goats because they tend to have more of a personality to them. They seem to kind of be a little bit more fun, a little bit more rambunctious. They tend to do goofier things. They tend to play. Goats like to play a lot more. They're more apt to like climb things, and if you put up things for them to climb and play on, they tend to go after that a lot more. Lambs are fairly playful. But they're just not as adventurous, and they just tend not to have as much of a personality. They tend not to be as much of people oriented livestock as goats tend to be. But I will tell you this, we do notice that the sheep tend to be a little bit more easy to keep in. They tend not to try to get out. We have a joke here on our farm that the goats want to be where they're not. So it doesn't matter if they're in a fantastic pasture or if, whatever, they're just like, yeah, I'd rather get out and go somewhere else. So that can be kind of the problem with goats. As far as aggression is concerned, we see just as aggressive sheep as we do goats. So I don't necessarily think that is an issue. Rut with males, rams and bucks, so bucks, the male goats, can go into rut, and they'll just urinate all over themselves, and you'll walk out of your house one morning and you'll be like, what is that smell? And that's your male goat that's now in rut. Congratulations. You don't tend to get that with the sheep, so that's another positive, but we like them both. I think they're both really fun. I think they both have their positive and negative attributes. If you're pretty well versed in sheep and you want to pick up some goats, or if you're pretty well versed in goats and you want to pick up some sheep, I don't think you can go wrong. I think you've already got the nuts and bolts down. Sheep and goats both have their own kind of specific nutritional things that they need, specifically copper, but you can easily make it work. So good question. Luke, keep me posted if you guys decide to buy anything. Let me know how it goes and what your thoughts are on it. So what is your advice about buying 10 Dolings from the same farm? And is it advisable to buy bucks from the same farm as the Dolings? So Conrad, that's a tricky question. If it depends, it would depend on how closely related they were. We don't buy a lot of anything from the same farm. We have a few farms that we really like, that we do purchase from. We have very specific farms that we purchase very specific breeds from, but we like to diversify as much as we possibly can, just to prevent any type of genetic deficiencies, and also to compare. If you get all of your stuff from this, if you get all of your stuff from the same place, it's really difficult to compare it to anything else, because this is all and we see this a lot with individuals that are very first getting started in livestock. They may buy all of their livestock from one farm, and then they go to a show or they go somewhere else and they're like, oh my God, like they're just shocked. They're like, well, this animal's so much better than mine. I thought mine was really, really good. And, yours was really, really good compared to um, what you knew. But now if you get out there and see something else, maybe it doesn't seem to be as good after all. So I think just for that sheer fact of just keeping the genetics diversified, that's going to be, that's part of the battle as well. The other thing to consider is if you get 10 does or ewes from the same person and they are loosely related, and now you breed them on the same buck or the same ram, their offspring are all like, you're never breaking that cycle. Like, everybody's related to someone else. And then if you do get a keeper male out of any of them, then you've really got something that's related to everyone else. And this kind of gets into what we call line breeding. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're really, really happy with the genetics that you have and you have no problem with sticking with it, and there's no real changes that you want to make, you just find a line of an animal, of a breed, that you're perfectly smitten with, then by all means, you may not need to shake it up that much. But if you're new and getting started, we would encourage you to consider purchasing from multiple producers, just to get out there. The other thing that we would encourage everyone to do is, check out your local fairs. If you really want to go crazy, you can check out North American International Livestock Exposition in Louisville every fall. And you can go there and you can see sheep and goat breeds from all over the United States, and you can see the best of the best, and have a really good idea of what you're looking at. And you may even see some breeds that you never had a chance to see before. So, get out there, do some legwork, see what you can find, and kind of go from there. Randy, what's the difference between LA 200 and LA 300? Just the concentration. So 600 milligrams of LA 300 would be 2 milliliters. 600 of the LA 200 would be 3. So it's just math. So that's all. You're just dealing with concentration, and it's the same thing that you're going to run into with Bosi and Musi is another example of medications. It's an injectable vitamin E and selenium medication. Bosi and Musi, it's the difference is the concentration. Cheryl, hi Cheryl. If the dose says IM and you give it sub-Q, does the med still work? Yep, it does. Generally speaking, then there's exceptions to all this, and we've recently got into this with vets. Supposedly, I've never actually had a vet that told me that they told their customers to do this, but we've been hearing from a lot of people with Dectomax. They're like, yeah, my vet says to give it orally. Well, when you read the bottle, it says it's for injection, but their vet's telling them to give it orally. I don't know much about that. But when it comes to routes of administration, there's different schools of thought on routes of administration. So generally speaking, with routes of administration, we have slowest to fastest as far as injectables are concerned. The fastest route of administration is intravenous. You go directly into the vein and you inject it. And once it's given, and there's no turning back. So that animal's going to get the full dose right away, and it's going to hit them, and that's the end of it. Intramuscular IM injections are the second fastest route of administration. And then our slowest route of administration for injection is subcutaneous, which is underneath the skin. So the thought about the subcutaneous injections is that you can give a larger dose over a longer period of time because you have a slower absorption rate. But it's not appropriate for all medications. And so there are very specific medications that you need to give intramuscularly. When it comes to antibiotics, I go off of Pipestone Veterinary Guide, and Dr. Kennedy is who I kind of mirror my administration with, and he was a huge fan of subcutaneous injections of antibiotics, and that's the route that I give mine as well. Now, there's always a caveat to everything that everyone says. And so, For me to sit here and be like, I always do this, I always do that. Nah, that's not true. There's times that I give intramuscular injections, and there's time that I give it intravenous, and there's times that I give it subcutaneous. So let me give you an example. If I went out to my pasture and I found a sheep or a goat that was just acting a little down, they were just a little bit sick, maybe the start of an infection, I take their temp, they're running a real low grade temp, I'm going to go with the subcutaneous injection route of antibiotics that we talked about. I'm probably going to go for my new floor or my LA200. I'm going to give my 5 mLs of my LA200 or my 6 mLs of my new floor. And then in 48 hours, I'm going to give it again. If I go out there and that animal is just sick as a dog, they're running a huge fever, they're having all kinds of problems, I don't have time to mess around. And I am going to probably give them an intramuscular injection of that antibiotic because I wanted to get it in their system as fast as possible. And then I may follow up with a subcutaneous injection of something that's a little bit more longer lasting. Same thing with vitamin B deficiency. If I want to give my animal a vitamin B boost, I may give them a subcutaneous injection of vitamin B of a vitamin B complex just to help give them a boost, or give them maybe they're going off a feed a little bit and I need to stimulate their appetite. I can give them a little bit of vitamin B. But if I've got a goat with goat polio where I need to really they need that vitamin B right now, I'm either going to go the IV route or I'm going to go the intramuscular route. Starting an IV on a goat or a lamb is not easy. I would not even advise any of you try it unless you work in the medical career field where you're routinely starting IVs and you're comfortable with it. I wouldn't even consider it. So in that case, you're either calling the vet or you're going with an IM injection. But here's the deal. If you're not comfortable with the medication that you're giving and you don't know what you're doing, then reach out to someone that does and just ask. I don't mind. Your vet doesn't mind. There's other individuals that don't mind. And just ask. Be like, hey, I've got this going on. I've got this med. What do I do? And then you give it. You pay attention to how it works. You put that in your toolkit, and then you can use it in the future if you need to. But that's a great question. I'm sorry that there's not a perfect answer for you, but that's the best I can give you at the time. So I hope that helps. Very good question. Thank you for that. I've seen you talk about Cdnt and penicillin mix shots for new lambs. I cannot find penicillin anywhere. Yeah, and that is an issue. Can you substitute LA200? I don't know. Let me tell you this. So back in the day, when I was a kid, there was kind of a magic concoction shot that we used to give to everyone, and we weren't the only ones by any means. And some of you may have heard of this before if you've been in the business before. And we used to give a shot that consisted of vitamin B, BOC, which is vitamin E and selenium, and LA200 all together to our newborns. And it took care of anything that they had going on. If it helped prevent infection, it helped give them a little bit of a boost. And then if we had any concerns about selenium deficiency or white muscle, it was going to take care of that as well. It really knocks them on their butt. I mean, you can tell when you give it to them, it knocks them on their butt. And so this is the first time I've ever even talked about LA200 for newborns. But you bring up a really important point, and the really important point is that you can't find penicillin right now if your life depended on it. So what do you do, right? And so I don't have an answer for you right now. The only thing I can do is I can promise you that I'm going to talk to some other individuals, and I'm going to kind of see. I'm going to get some thoughts from some people, and I'll put something out there soon. And we'll talk about it. If you don't see me post anything on it online, or if for some reason you don't follow us online, and I completely get this, like some of you don't do Facebook, and I completely understand. Before Linessa Farms got into doing, our online presence, I did not have Facebook. I am still not a fan of it, but it's a necessary evil if you're going to run a business nowadays. So if you're not following us, just hop back on here next Wednesday and we'll talk about it. But that's a good question. Short answer is yes, people do give LA200. Long answer is I need to do some more research before I give you a definitive answer. So sorry I couldn't give you more than that, but that's a great question and an important one. And so thank you for that. I think it's important to give a little bit of antibiotic with that CDT at birth just to prevent we don't get navel ill, and I get people that kind of scoff at us. And again, this is not my idea. Most of the stuff that I talk to you guys about, like, I promise you, I do not sit at home and just like dream this stuff up like, oh, you know what? I'm going to tell people to give. No, this is from veterinarians, from veterinarian books, things like that. As far as the CDT and penicillin shot at birth, that's something that is well known and very widely done throughout the industry. And I promise you, that's not a Tim idea. So, yeah. But thanks. Great question. So, can you keep a ram and a buck together? Absolutely. Yeah, you can keep a ram and a buck together. We have some rams and bucks that we have kept together, and we don't have any issues with them. And then you get other rams that they just decide they're just going to try to kill each other. And then you get rams and bucks that are perfectly fine until it gets to the time of year where the ewes or the does are in heat, and then they start wanting to kill each other. So just like anything else, you just have to monitor behavior and monitor the animals and monitor their demeanor, and you just take it from there. But yeah, we have bucks and rams that we keep all of our boys together, and they all cohabitate, and they're perfectly fine being together, and we don't have any issues. We have had them in the past. I'm reminded of a interesting story of when I was young. A friend of mine that's an anesthesiologist, they raised he's an anesthesiologist now. He wasn't when we were young. But anyways, they raised pulled Dorsets. And I remember his dad bought a new pulled Dorset ram, and they had brought it to the house, and they had the two rams separated by a woven wire fence. And dad went to work, came home that day, and there's two dead rams, one on each side of the pasture. And those rams had literally sat there and hit each other through the fence all day long, and it killed them. So yeah, you really got to watch your animals. And if you see them starting to get aggressive, I always want you guys to be safe. Don't put yourself between two animals that are ramming one another. That's not smart. But you need to get them separated as early as possible. Generally, you will find there will be one aggressor that's kind of starting the trouble, and the other one's either trying to get away from or just kind of like not into it. You'll be able to tell which one's the aggressor normally. But yes, by all means, you can keep them together. Yeah, if you haven't hit the like button, yeah, come on, guys. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Can Nuflor be given sub-Q in the armpit area? I've read that it should be given in the neck area only. So if you were giving IM shots, the neck area would be the preferred area to give it, or in the rump. As far as subcutaneous shots, we normally give all of our subcutaneous shots over the rib cage. So yeah, you would say that armpit area, but over the rib cage is generally the side that you're going to be wanting to give your subcutaneous shots. Here's a little word of advice for those of you that have animals that are either going to show or they may show. If you're getting a granuloma following an injection is something that's very common. So, you just get this hard calcified little knot that's going to probably be there for the rest of that animal's life. It may leave an itty bitty little scar. Usually it's the size of a pencil eraser or something like that. But here's something to consider. The show side of an animal is the right side. Generally speaking, at least when the judge comes out and the judge is going to be looking at this animal, the individual showing the animal will generally be standing on the animal's left. The judge will generally be looking at the profile of the animal on the right. And this does change as the judge is doing a walk around, but the long, hard views are generally taken of the animal's right-hand side. If you're going to be giving your CDT vaccines and things like that, it's worth taking the time to give that injection on the animal's left side. That way, if you do get a little knot or you do get a little scar or something like that, and you're the type of person that it's going to drive you crazy, then just make sure that you're giving those injections on the animal's left. Not to say that no one's going to see it, but they're not going to have as good of a look at it or as hard of a look at it if they were to see it on the animal's right hand side. Hopefully that makes sense. Have you seen you speak on penicillin shortage in your videos? Thanks for your answer. You're welcome. Joaquin, do you have a repeater syringe that you would recommend? We do have a repeater syringe that we use, and to be honest with you, I can't remember where I got it. I would assume I have a pistol grip repeater syringe. I believe it's a 30 milliliter repeater syringe that I want to say I got from Premier One is probably where I got it. What bacterial infection would you use Thailand? I don't use Thailand. We see Thailand used a lot in swine applications. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it per se. The Tylosin or whatever, I can't recall what the actual pharmaceutical name for that medication is, but we just don't use it. So our go-tos on the farm that we generally use is, as far as antibiotics are concerned, is penicillin, LA200, Nuflor, and Draxin. Draxin, the beauty of Draxin is it's a very long-acting antibiotic. I believe it's like a 7-day antibiotic, and it's normally one shot and one shot only, and it works for hard to kill bugs. It's been shown to have a lot of good qualities when dealing with if you get a hoof rot infection that you can't deal with, or an anaerobic bacteria. So, there's a lot of hubbub about hoof rot, but you can just get an animal with a wound on their foot that just doesn't heal because it never gets any air. And Draxin can work really well. Again, downside with Draxin is you're looking at like $300 a bottle. So the day that goes generic, a whole bunch of us in the industry are going to be doing backflips. But a lot of vets you'll see will give an injection of like a shorter acting antibiotic, like maybe Nuflor, and they'll actually mix it with a little bit of Draxin. But those are kind of the main ones that we use: LA200, Nuflor, Draxin, and then penicillin. So I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question. I feel like, Gabrielle, you're kind of beating me up tonight. You're asking me questions I don't have the answers to. But, in all seriousness, if I don't know, I'll just tell you guys I don't know. I don't want to give you bad information, but I'll look into it and get back to you. Conrad, if bucks are in a different part of the farm from where the does, when they're in heat, do you take the does to the buck as best practice? No. We always bring our males to the females. We don't do it the opposite way around. So a couple of things when it comes to movement of your livestock, and this is just, if you just want to talk about best practice is when you're weaning your kids and your lambs, you always move the moms instead of moving the babies. And the thought process behind this is anytime you move the animals, it's stressful on them. And the babies they're going to be the most stressed by the move. And so you always move the moms, you don't move the babies. When it comes to breeding, we always take our males to the females. We don't take our females to the males. Synchronization of estrus and keeping those ewes or does together in a pack in a familiar environment goes a long way for timing and to keep that timing together. And so if you introduce that male, it's going to help out a lot to get them all to go. If they're in estrus, that male is going to go after them no matter where they're at. You could put them anywhere. The males aren't very picky about it, but it's best practice to keep the females where they're at and bring the males to them. Now, there's some old wives' tales that say, taking your ewes or your does for a ride in the trailer or whatever causes them to go into estrus or causes them to have babies. There's zero scientific evidence to support that. I know that, there could be tons of anecdotal evidence, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just telling you that I can't verify any of that because there's no studies or anything to actually show that. So that's best practice. So hopefully that makes sense. How can you tell if grass is stressed and releasing cyanide? So when it comes to grasses, um, and branches and things, and this is a great question, Edgar. Oh man, see, I think I forget some of the stuff that I know sometimes, um, and I get asked questions, but sometimes I don't get asked for years. So cyanide's a huge issue. Um, I Cyanide is a huge issue, and there's a few times that cyanide really gets you, and you have to watch what type of grasses you're growing, and you have to watch the trees that you have around your pasture and in your area, and you have to kind of understand what's going on with the cyanide. So there are times that plants can release cyanide uh, for short periods of time, and this can be due to drought stress. This can be due to frost. And so, there's certain types of grasses, sorghums, and things like that, where you really have to watch uh, if they get stressed by a frost, they can be high in cyanide. Cherry trees are some of the worst for cyanide. If you are the type of person that you like to cut down branches and throw them over the fence to your animals, don't do that with cherry trees. If a cherry tree branch is freshly broken, the period of time between the leaves wilting and turning brown, they tend to release cyanide that can poison and kill your animals. We've seen this happen on a few farms where they have choke cherry trees on the perimeter of the farm. A big storm comes through and blows down some branches, and the animals eat the wilting leaves off of the trees and they get poisoned. Um, the only way to know with your grasses is to have them checked. Now, when it comes to very specific types of grasses, if they get hit by a frost, then you just don't let the animals graze it after it's been hit by a frost. But to determine if the animal is going to be, or if the animal is going to be subjected to cyanide or nitrogen levels that aren't proper and things like that due to drought stress, you actually would have to take that in and have it tested to know. There's no way to just look at it and tell. So that's a very, very complex uh, question. And to be honest with you, some folks just totally avoid um, certain plants and certain species just so they don't have to worry about this issue when it nitrates or cyanide, either one when it comes to frost stress, drought stress, or anything like that. All right. How to calculate the amount of land to let sheep graze daily. So that's a forever disputed question between all of us in the business. I have you'll go to one channel and on YouTube and they'll say, you got to have this many animals per acre. And I've never been a fan of that. Because if you go there with me logically for a moment, I think we can at least come to a soft consensus. Um, Look, is your 5 acres the same as your neighbor's 5 acres? No. Well, why not? Well, you probably have different species of grasses growing there, or maybe your soil quality is better, or maybe you fertilized and they didn't, or maybe your pasture's newer than theirs is. Now go 20 miles up the road and tell me how much different. The farther you get away from your farm, the different soils you encounter. We own one farm up. I'll give you a good example. I lease a farm up the road that is on sandy soil, has really good drainage, and has completely different soil makeup than my farm, which is hard clay soil. I I need to add lime to my soil all the time. Um, on my other farm, I don't add lime. The list goes on and on and on. I just baled today. I can tell you that the alfalfa that I baled on that farm was probably a week and a half ahead of where mine is now. It's going to have a completely different nutritional makeup. It's going to have a completely different uh, protein makeup. All of that's going to be different, and we're 10-15 miles difference between the two of us. Um, so that's why I say, if someone tells you like you can graze this many animals on this much land, like, no, I'm not buying that. Right now you couldn't raise one animal on 20 acres in West Texas where they haven't had rain since October, and here I've got clover so thick you literally cannot walk through it. It'll pull your shoes off your feet. And so it just depends. So what do you do? What's the real answer? Well, the real answer is you've got to keep track of those animals. You've got to go out and you've got to look at the ground. You've got to see how far they've eaten down. You got to see when they're running out of feed. And it's a learning process, and that you have to do it year after year after year. You have to work the same ground with the same types of animals, and you have to just learn when to move them. And that is a process that no one can tell you. And that's very, very frustrating, because at the end of the day, you know, as a person that at least makes part of their living off of giving you information, it's really, really tempting for me to just make up numbers and throw them at you. And I know there's the Farmer's Almanac, and there's the Greg Judys of the world and everyone else out there, that everybody's got different answers for you with that. But I think if we all think about it, just take a step back and think about it logically. The reality is every piece of ground is different. Every soil is different. Every species of plant that grows in different geographical locations is different. So it's very, very difficult to give you a straight answer on that. But the good news is if you educate yourself on what to look for, if you educate yourself on when you need to move those animals and why, and you keep a good eye on your animals' overall nutrition, I think you can get a pretty good handle on it, and you can learn what's appropriate for your piece of property. All right. First time catching you live. You have helped a lot with our goats. Thank you. Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad. I'm glad to help anyone out that I can help out. Yeah, and you guys are fine. I like that. I like the live feed. It's I some people behind the scenes, some other producers online I talk to, some of us talk to each other, and a few of the other producers or the other YouTube people that I've talked to, they're like, there's no way. Like, there's no way I do the live stream, because ultimately at the end of the day, you're scared to death of a few things. One is you're gonna misspeak and say something dumb uh, that you're not gonna be able to take back. And I most definitely don't want any of you to do anything that's going to hurt your animals. That's for sure. Um, and the other thing is you actually have to have a pretty decent idea of what you're talking about. So if people ask you a question, you can actually answer. But there's always going to be things that I don't know the answer to, and there's always going to be things that I have to look up and read for you guys, and get back with you, and that's perfectly fine. The beauty of the live stream is it allows me to get right now information on what it is that you guys need to know about. And as the seasons change, different things come up. This week we may talk a lot about worming. Next week we may talk a lot about nutrition or about weaning. When we roll through the year, we get farther along in the summer and into the fall, I suspect that our talks are going to go more towards breeding and things like that. And that's perfectly fine. And I'm learning every day, just like you guys are. I don't do anything the same as I did, when I raised sheep when I was a kid versus today. There's very few things that we do the same. The medications are different. The worming is different. Everything's different. Every year I learn something new. Sometimes I find that I did things that weren't the best way to do it. I find better ways to do it. You find new ways of handling animals, medicating animals, worming animals, and that's okay. This should be a learning process for everyone, and you should learn how to do new and different things, and that's good. That's what it's all about, right? And as I've always said in the past, exposing yourself to a lot of different information is valuable as well. There's nothing wrong with listening to read everything you can get your hands on, listen to everything that you can listen to. and just kind of glean through that information, decide what's best, what works for you and what doesn't, and take it as it is. You may pick up a few things from me that are very useful for you, but you may pick up things from someone else that are just as useful or maybe more appropriate for your farm. So it's a learning process. Try not to get too married to one person and their ideas. I think everybody has stuff to offer. Some of it's going to work for you and some of it isn't. So I think that's it for tonight. We're going to wrap it up. I really enjoy talking with you guys. I appreciate you taking the time to watch us and support our channel, and sharing us with your friends and family. That's it too. A lot of the fact that a lot of you have just referred us to people. You're like, hey, check these people out. And that goes a long way. So thanks a bunch. I hope everyone has a great week. And I look forward to seeing all of you again soon. So I'm Tim from Linessa Farms, specialty in heirloom livestock. Thanks for joining me again today. And I look forward to seeing you again next time.